Hey y'all, it's Olivia. Welcome back to my channel, AB Reads, or welcome if you're new. Today we are going to be doing a much postponed July wrap up. And in July, I read 11 things and I DNF'd one thing. So let's go ahead and get into it. We'll start off with my DNF. My only DNF this month, and my first DNF in a while, was Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. I got about 75 pages into this, and all of these bookmarks are things that I thought were cringy or straight out offensive. This book is, like, it starts with the death of two husbands, and then their dads, who they were estranged from because they were gay, are like going on this like revenge, like finding out the mystery of why they were killed. I may pick this back up if I see like people that I trust having good reviews of this, but I haven't really seen any queer people having good reviews of this. And that was like just like how it started, like using queer trauma in that way. If someone can convince me to read this, that like the book somehow redeemed itself from there, but like I don't really care to read about how straight people had, you know, like character development out of queer deaths. So, you know, let me know if this is worth picking up again, but I was happy DNFing it just because it wasn't the worst thing that I've ever read, but I wasn't enjoying it and I couldn't really see like glimmers of me, you know, loving it. So I had plenty of other stuff that I was excited about reading, and this one's just gonna get put down unless I hear otherwise. Now, I'm just gonna go sequentially through my reads this month. I'm kind of thinking about in the future, maybe separating out. Daisy, come on. We're getting down to business. I know. It's close to dinner time. Maybe in the future, I'll think about like separating out like horror from like literary fiction, just because I know that not all horror fans like to hear about literary fiction stuff and vice versa. But for now, and I also like a lot of people do their ratings like from like least favorite to most favorite, and I love watching how other people do that, but my brain doesn't work that way. Like, I don't think I could order these things. That would take a lot of thinking to figure out what order these went into. But my first read for this month was a great read. It was The Push by Ashley Audrain, and this was recommended over by Jordaline at Jordaline Reads, and it's a thriller about the mother of a creepy evil child. Like, there's something wrong with this child, and the mom is like, it's very literary in that it's talking to about like the expectations of motherhood and you know, like what it means to be a mother, how that changes you. I did this, talked about it a little bit in a reading vlog that I had, but I thought it was great. The thriller part of it was great. I thought that the thinking about motherhood was great, and like expectations for like how a mother should feel about her children and like loving children the same. I hope we're enjoying these scan lines on my face. But yeah, The Push by Ashley Audrain, definitely recommend if you're into either of those things, if you're into thrillers or if you're into like books about motherhood. The next read for this month was There's No Such Thing as an Easy Job by Kikuko Tsumura, and this one was very cool. I didn't really have a lot of expectations about it going in. I'd just seen the cover a lot and seen a lot of buzz about it, but didn't know what it was about going in, which is probably for the best, that I didn't have a lot of expectations, not that it's like something that gets easily spoiled. But this is about like a woman in Japan. It's translated from the Japanese, about this woman who's like tired of her job, and she like starts to go into these like temp jobs. That's the worst noise I've ever heard her make. Sorry for the brief intermission. Daisy had a hairball. we've taken care of it now. So I was talking about there's no such thing as an easy job. So it's about this woman who is, seeking out all these temp jobs, and like they're supposed to be the easiest, most boring job in the world. Like that's what she wants. Unfortunately, every single temp job that she goes to, something odd happens, something unexplained happens that causes her to have to leave that job and look for a new one. And I don't really want to talk about like, like what happens at all of these jobs, but it's like bizarre, offbeat. I think you should go into it yourself, and I really recommend this book. I think it's really good if you're looking for something like kind of funny, and just like odd. Like there's definitely like commentary about like, not commentary on the page, but like I think that it's somewhat supposed to be like social critique about like working and jobs and expectations, but it's fun. It's a fun book. The next book that I read this month was Creatures of Passage by Morowa Yejidé, and this was also in that reading vlog that I did. I read it at the beginning of the month, which is like almost 2 months ago now. I've been putting this off for so long. And I loved Creatures of Passage. It was a 5-star read for me. I didn't really know anything going into it except for it was like a speculative that had been recommended by PJ Lee Clark on Instagram. And that was all I needed. And it was like compared to Beloved by Toni Morrison. But it's like, it's so dark. It's like set near like a alternate history, speculative Washington, DC, and like a lot of it, like most of it seems very like grounded in reality, but it follows like our main character who has a car that she kind of like uses as like a taxi for her community that's like haunted. There's like it refers to like this like dead white girl ghost that's like haunting the trunk of the car that like allows it to have like some sort of like mystical powers, but it's so dark. It talks about like so many topics and like very dark. So it's talking about like post-Vietnam War, like PTSD, talking about the opioid crisis, talking about predators in your community, like child predators in the community. But there was like so much richness and like history, and I loved the relationship between the main character, and then it's talking frequently about her brother who died, and there's like someone related to them. It's been a while since I've read it now. I don't remember. I think it's her sister-in-law maybe, can like tell the future, like has like some sort of like prophetic powers, where she knows like whenever something bad is going to happen to people in the community. It's really good, but I will say it's like really dark. I would kind of relate it maybe to like, I think it's better than anything by Neil Gaiman that I've read. And I think it has like new stuff to offer, but kind of like that like dream world quality that I don't know what else I would really compare it to. I'll just know from now on to not film at this time of day. We're learning together. The next book that I read this month was 12 Nights at Rotterhouse by J.W. Ocker, which is a straight up horror novel about a haunted house. It's about a travel writer who is going to spend 13 nights at this like very haunted place, and he's like a skeptic, doesn't believe really in like hauntings, but like wants to believe. And so right off the bat, it's like he's going to spend 13 nights, and that the book is called 12 Nights. So like I like that. I think that's has a lot of flavor to it. The book follows the travel writer, and then also like his childhood friend, who he had become kind of like estranged from, due to like this thing that had happened in their past that they're kind of vague about, and you kind of find out more about it as the book goes on. But the the haunting in this house is like so weird and like kind of like trippy that there's it kind of gave me like American Horror Story vibes, where there was like, it almost felt like a haunted hotel, because there was, I think it had previously been used as like a hotel at one point, because there was like different people who were coming to stay, and they had like the Hall of Death, where there's like people who had died in like mysterious ways in each room, and like creepy ways, like a room filled with dolls. Like the set dressing for this book was really good. I was gripped. I listened to this on audiobook on a road trip, and like I read it there and like on the way back, and like I was like arriving back at my house like as the book was finishing, like perfect timing for my road trip. And I was like gripped whenever I was like actually in Dallas, where it was where I was going. The whole time I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to get back in my car to be driving back so I can listen to the rest of this book. The ending, I was like shook whenever I first finished it. And the more that it's like sat with me, the less I've liked it. Whenever you like get down into like the nitty gritty of it, because there's a lot to take in. There's a lot to unpack at the end, a lot to unpack. And I would say it's very exciting. I found it very interesting, and it was definitely a spooky house. It felt like very like hot horror, like where a lot of like haunted houses like feel like they have to be like cold and like, you know, cool toned blues, blacks, grays. But I remember there was like, it felt like it was like very like hot and moldy and grimy, like ooh. So it was definitely fun, but one that I would like recommend with like a caveat that I don't want to stand by all the things that you could unpack from this. I think that there's valid criticisms, but a fun read if you're like looking for a haunted house book. The next book that I read this month was Transmuted by Eve Harms, which I did a whole review of, so check it out. I'll try to remember to link it below. But Transmuted was about a Twitch game streamer who was seeking out like facial feminization surgery, and like had saved up all of this money, had crowdfunded through her like Twitch platform, and then had to give all that money up to like save her dad. And so then she's like seeking out alternate procedures. This is a queer body horror novella, and so you know, you can assume that the alternate procedures do not go in the ideal manner that they would, and things get weird. This also has images like from alchemy and history. I would definitely recommend following Eve Harms on Instagram because she's fascinating. She like posts alchemical things all the time and like spooky images that I really gel with. This was really good. It has like some commentary on what transitioning means for people, but I would say like if you're looking for a good body horror novella, this is it. I loved it. I really loved it. But you can like check out my review for my full thoughts on it. I don't remember what my star ratings were for any of these. I haven't been doing that. I hope y'all don't need star ratings. I think that it's so it depends on the day for me. Usually I go like kind of based on feeling, but then sometimes I put a little bit more like critical thought into it. The next book that I finished this month was The Disordered Cosmos, and my printout of all my books that I've read this month, her name is too small on this. I'm definitely gonna have it like right here, so I apologize. She identifies as agender, but I believe still uses she, her pronouns, and like in some instances like refers to herself as a woman in the book. I don't know. Okay, so this book is so good. So good. It's nonfiction. It's about her experiences as, the reason I went into that is because it's like about her experiences as being like the first female Black astrophysicist PhD in like a university in the US. And I believe that she refers to herself in, like, as like a woman in that way, that she's like being treated like a woman. Talks a bit in the book about how she identifies as agender, but that she doesn't necessarily consider herself like on the trans spectrum, that like she relates to it differently than she feels like most people on the trans spectrum would. So I believe that I'm correct on that, but like, you know, feel free to correct me on that below if you know something different than me, or if it's updated since the book. But this does everything. I'm not very good at like sciencey things, in that sense. Like I have, you know, medical knowledge, like I'm good at that kind of sciencey things, but as far as like physics and, you know, stuff beyond our world, nope, don't know a lot about it, and it's a little bit over my head. Get it? Like space over my head. But like she like relates it to like how she makes it seem so cool. It's like almost like you want to like go out and become an astrophysicist too. It's like whenever people who like are really into running like talk about how like freeing running is, and then so you get convinced to like go running yourself, and it's a miserable experience because their brains just work differently than yours. I feel like that's like the experience I would have, but during the runtime of this audiobook, I felt like I could do it too. And okay, so like the beginning starts out like very like physics nonfiction kind of information, and then it goes into like how she's been treated as a Black person and as a woman in academia, and then the book gets incredible because then she goes into like her leftist politics, and especially like worker solidarity, and that like, you know, her work as like a highly educated person isn't intrinsically more valuable than the people who are working custodial staff in her school, that like they're a necessary part of the scientific process too, and like how much gatekeeping there is in who's a scientist and whose labor is valuable, and goes so into like real like worker rights, labor theory. Like I was just like taken aback, and I was like, you are incredible, I love you, as I was reading it. Just so good. And I hope that people who pick this up for whenever they're looking to read something about astrophysics or identity first kind of reading, come away with what she's saying about like how a liberal view of racial representation isn't enough, and that we're not going to have any liberation for any minority community without economic liberation. I loved it. She's much more eloquent than I am in being able to verbalize these things, and I really respect that. Very cool. And I was just like not expecting it at all, so that was especially cool. The next book that I finished this month was The Maidens by Alex Michaelides, and I never read The Silent Patient. This is his second book after like The Silent Patient was like a huge success. For one thing, I wasn't really reading thrillers that much. I still wouldn't consider myself that I read like a lot of new thrillers, but this one seemed really interesting to me just because of the atmosphere, the dark academia atmosphere, and it definitely delivers on that. If you're looking for that kind of atmosphere, like a very like collegiate setting, university setting, then this is good. And especially if you're like pretty easily impressed. I'm not saying that as like talking down, but like if you like just reading, you're not easily disappointed by thrillers, then I think this is a good one. I wasn't really like surprised by anything. It was just like I was reading it and it was really like engaging, but whenever we were like finding out stuff, and I was just like, yeah, this makes sense. Like there was no like huge plot twist, people believe that there's a huge plot twist at the end of this, but like I kind of felt like I wasn't hugely surprised, which didn't really matter because I read this in basically one sitting, and so I mean it was definitely very engaging, a decent thriller, and I liked the atmosphere. I haven't seen any. The dark academia atmosphere seems like something that I could really get into, but I haven't really seen any other books that cross my radar except for They Never Learn. I do want to read that one. But if you have any other recommendations for me that you think like I would like in this atmosphere, it seems like it would be appealing to me. But I just haven't read any others yet. So this was kind of my first foray, and it went okay. It went okay. I think I gave it like 3 stars, which is not bad. Maybe I gave it 2. I think I gave it 2, but still not bad. It's still worth reading. The next book that I read this month was Edge of Dark Water by Jo Lansdale, and this one is set in like southeast Texas on the Sabine River, and it's about this like group of kids. I think like in like the early, like maybe like 1930s, 1940s, early Hollywood era. And in this group of kids, I don't remember all their names now. It's not that important, but one of their friends dies, and her like lifetime dream was to go to Hollywood, and she wanted to be like an actress in Hollywood. And so these kids decide to like take her body and take her out to Hollywood. I thought it was going to be a horror, and I guess it's kind of a horror, but it's just like more just like dark literary fiction. The kids are joined in their journey by the main character's mom, who is in an abusive relationship, and so she's ready to get out too, and they go on this adventure. Things happen. It's mostly like, I think, like a character development type of book. So if you're looking for something like that that's like dark and kind of about like children character development, I thought it was good. It's hard to talk about though, because it's so much just like character development. Not a huge amount of plot stuff happens. There is like this horrific character, this like mythologized character called Skunk, who seems to be like kind of an urban legend in their community, but they think that he's like following them, and then turns out he's not an urban legend, he's real. I don't think this is like a spoiler, but it was just like the one moment that I was like shook in the book was whenever this character is like actually real and they actually are being hunted. But I wouldn't even say that's like the main thing to come away with from the book. It's really more about just like the characters and their growth and their relationships, and then like kind of like figuring out the mystery of how their friend died, I guess, is the big dark overtone to the book. But I don't really want to give this 3 or 4 stars. It was pretty good, but not gonna be an all-time favorite for me. But I enjoyed it. I read it over on like Instagram with like the Summer of Horror 21 read along that Spookish Mommy was doing. I've been hoping for like a little bit more like conversation from other people about what their thoughts on it were, but I think like only a couple of people in the group like ended up reading it, because only a couple people were really talking about it. But I digress. The next book that I finished in July was The Elementals by Michael McDowell. This book was incredible. This is a horror book, a classic horror book. And I read this with the Horror in 24 group. And I skipped out on it this month because I had so much other stuff to read, especially with the Spooky Smart Bitch readathon. And it's like a Stephen King, which I've already read a couple Stephen King this year, so it's like I want to kind of spread the love around. But this one was so good, and the group conversation at the end was really good. But this is a horror story set on the Alabama Gulf Coast, and it follows two families who have like a property of 3 houses, and 2 they live in, and then this other one is like abandoned. And this one of the members of the family is like this brother and his daughter who live in New York, and they've been kind of like separated from the family, and she's never been to these houses before, and she gets very intrigued about this 3rd house and figuring out why none of them will talk about it and why none of them will go in it, and figuring out the mystery of that house. A very unique horror setting because it's set on the beach, like in the sand, and like it's the only horror anything I've seen where like sand gets a really creepy, horrific texture to it, and just like the feeling of the sun beating down on you. They were talking in the book about how it's like 100 degrees under the live oaks, and I was reading this at the park when it was 100 degrees under the live oaks. It's still 100 degrees outside. I don't know if you can tell that I have a summer glow to me. But definitely a book to read in the summer, and I love reading stuff that's set on the Gulf Coast because there's not that much horror that's set on the Gulf Coast. This and the book that I read before this, Edge of Dark Water, Southeast Texas, like, wow, it's a horror that's actually like set near me. That's usually whenever we get stuff down here, it's like in New Orleans and written by people who are not from New Orleans, and just kind of like this imagined version of New Orleans. So was very excited to read something that hit close to home and was actually incredible. Definitely recommend this one, and I can't wait to read more stuff by Michael McDowell. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to talk about this book. The next book that I finished this month was The Remaking by Clay McLeod Chapman. Y'all, this book has mixed reviews, which I just like, I don't even understand what people aren't loving about this book, because this actually was like a 5-star horror read for me, which I feel like it's hard to get a 5-star horror read, especially whenever it's like not really dealing with any kind of like issue or whatever. It was just incredible to me, and I was so gripped by it. But the premise is, in the 1930s, a mother and daughter are burned at the stake as witches. Their story inspires an urban legend told around a campfire in the 50s, a 70s horror flick, a 90s meta remake, and a true crime podcast. But all this storytelling comes with a cost. Oh my gosh, it was so good. So yeah, like it opens up with like the urban legend about this mom and daughter witch pair, and what happened to them, and then like it goes on into like the filming of this like 70s, like it's gonna be a pretty shitty movie. It's like a passion project, but then creepy things happen on set, and because like people can tell that there's like a creepy tone to it, and there's like a little bit of controversy surrounding it, it becomes like a sleeper cult hit, so much that like in the 90s, like this person who grew up loving it wanted to remake it, and it's like starring like the girl who was in the 70s version, or she has like a cameo in it, and so people are like getting all excited. But it has so much to say, I feel like, about filmmaking and about child actors, about remakes. It was just so good. I love movies. I love horror movies. I love like reading stuff that's about it. At one point, it's like talking about meta remakes, and the main character says, if all your characters speak in this meta self-aware horror talk, it'll sound like they're all the same, that they're just extensions of one person, of the screenwriter, of you. And that's like such an issue that I have with like all of this meta stuff, is that you're like forgetting to like also just tell a story and like have characters, because you're so busy like proving to the audience that you're in the know and that you can just like reference things back to back, that you like forget to actually make a real movie. but I loved this. I thought that the main character was cool. It had like spooky elements. It kind of felt like the book equivalent of like the perfect pizza party horror movie. Like it was fun. It wasn't like, I don't think necessarily like trying to really be super edgy or be super graphic. It was just like spooky witch horror film vibes, and I really clicked with it. And I picked this up at the library because I hadn't heard anyone talk about it at the time, just because I loved Whisper Down the Lane earlier this year. I loved this one more. This is, if you're gonna pick one up, then this is my recommendation first over Whisper Down the Lane, even though I really liked that one too. Scan lines. And then finally, I feel like this video's going on forever. Finally, maybe I will split up these videos into horror and other stuff just so I have time to talk. But the last book that I finished in July was Dear Senthuran by Akwaeke Emezi. And this is their memoir about kind of like, I've seen people like want to pick up this one after maybe not necessarily liking their other work, but I feel like it's the most Emezi, like high level Emezi vibes book of them all. I've loved all of their books. But I think that it's talking so much about the release of their other books, and especially like about how Freshwater kind of was their memoir too, but like kind of novelized because they thought thought rightly that people would be not fully accepting of their story, like when told full force and with like their whole heart right off the bat. But now that they have like these people who hopefully are understanding them a little bit more, we're ready to tell this story. But talking about like the publicity tours for it, talking so much about their personhood and their spiritual, I don't even want to say like beliefs, but like their interiority, just like they're so fully formed as a person in ways that I really admire. And I think if you like their other work, then you're gonna love this one. But if you don't like their other work, I would say try other books besides Freshwater first. If it's, you know, if you find it confusing, like Pet's really good, and then like The Death of Vivek OG, like probably is where I would start with them. But I'm gonna read everything they ever write. I think they're incredible. This book got me juiced up. It was very good. But yeah, July was an incredible reading month for me. There weren't many duds, even though I did DNF a book, but let me know down below if I need to give it another shot. But yeah, hopefully next time I'll film at a different time so that the lighting is a little bit more steady. And let me know if you've read any of these. Let me know if any of these sound interesting to you. Let me know if you think that I should split up the videos. The reason that I've postponed this so long is because I knew it was going to be so long because I wanted to talk about all of these books. But I feel like I could have talked about them even more. Thinking about doing like some more kind of like short and casual bedtime story kind of reviews where I like tuck into bed in my jammies and don't have to put on makeup. Not that I have to put on makeup, but I just kind of like to. But during the week, I find it hard to like come home from work and put on makeup. So I was thinking about doing some more casual, like quick 5-minute book reviews rather than like feeling like everything's piling up to the end of the month. So let me know what you think. If you like this video, please comment down below. Please let me know if any of these sound good to you. Hopefully they do. Hopefully I sold you on some of these because I had some great reads. And tell me the best book that you read in July. Subscribe if you want to. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.